The next 50 kilometers of route were technical and demanding and included some tricky mountain sections. Thick sand and the ever-present dust problem were constant factors that were keeping crews on their toes. The day was also warming up, with the thermometer starting to rise towards the 30s.
Hannes Krobler and Henny Testecher were calling on all their experience to keep the RFS BMW X3 at the front of the field. Not having to worry about dust was a massive advantage for Krobler and Testecher, who were slowly starting to come under a bit of pressure from a flying Thomas Rundle and Jean Moore in the Baden Tyre Services Nissan Navara. The two cars started the day 29 seconds apart, and Rundle and Moore had gradually narrowed that down to just 15 seconds. It was an impressive performance, but for their supporters, reliability was a concern. The two production vehicles were joined at the front of the field by Colin Matthews and Alan Smith, who were also looking comfortable in the Century Racing CR3. Pace has never been a problem for Matthews and Smith, but a national championship win had so far eluded the pair, and reliability concerns were also a worry for their supporters.
A little further back on the road, reigning production vehicle champions Chris Visser and Jelpie Badenhorst had also made inroads into the Grobler-Testecher lead. The Ford now trailed the leaders by under a minute and was being chased by the impressive Don Thompson and Wayne Foster in the Zarco. The KZN crew were just over a minute behind Matthews and Smith, and behind them all looked to be well with Gary Berthold and Andre Vermeulen in the Atlas Copco Toyota Hilux.
From the outside, it looked as though Berthold and Vermeulen had built up a head of steam. Inside the cockpit, it was a different story, and what was later found to be a broken front differential mountings was slowing the Atlas Copco entry. And they'd fallen more than 5 minutes behind the leaders. Closing in on the Toyota Hilux were the steady Nick and Ryan Harper in the Motorride Bat. The Harpers had moved ahead of rookie Richard Fuller and Jeff Minnett in the Atlas Copco Bat to move into third overall among the special vehicles. Fuller's performance was an eye-opener and marked him down as a driver to watch in the future. Northwest crew Jannie Visser and Joks Leroux were emerging as the surprise package in the Team Barbespan Toyota Hilux, and were still holding off Terence Marsh and George Smallberger in the Regent Racing Nissan Navara. Dust was making overtaking difficult for midfield runners, and also still part of a small three-car train were Marius and Yolinda Ferrie with the PHB Bat, 5th overall among the special vehicles.
Two-time SA Special Vehicle champions Cully and Quinton Sewald had picked up a couple of places through a combination of sheer pace and the retirements of Jimmy Zaho, Stefan Kutsia and Evan Hutchison and Dani Stassen in the Motorride Revo. A slight overshoot at a gate cost them a few seconds, and they were still around 15 minutes behind the leaders. The Sewalds still had some work to do, as did Johan van Staden and James Rousseau in the Atlas Copco Bat Spec 5. Both the Sewalds and the Atlas Copco crew were trying to shake off the effects of 10-minute penalties imposed during the prologue, and for both crews it was a case of damage control. Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson were also having to recover from prologue problems after they beached the Regent Racing Jimco and lost wads of time. Damage control was also on the minds of Johan and Etienne Besadenhout in the Adenco Bat, with the Cape-based brothers pushing hard. Free Staters Loder Brain and Rian Krailing were also victims of the 10-minute penalty syndrome, but were also being slowed by dust, which was a major problem when a number of cars were running close together.
Trying to close in on the Rubicon Ford Ranger were Christian Deploy and Henk Janssen van Vieren, who'd lost time on the prologue when they beached the RFS Toyota Hilux. It was tough going when the dust was at its thickest and crews had to exercise a great deal of caution. Deploy and Janssen van Vieren still held a narrow lead over the Team Castrol Toyota Hilux of Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin, but both crews had moved ahead of Brett and Steve Parker, who were steadily losing ground and were headed for retirement. Up behind the Jimco were Malcolm Koch and Johan Berger, who were having a steady run in another of the Toyota Hilux SP Class entries.
The final section of the first loop of the race took crews back to the designated service park at the Darling Club. It featured varied terrain, with the route proving to be much more technical and a lot slower than in previous years.
At the front of the field, RFS BMW crew Hannes Grobler and Henny Tersteger looked to still be in control of proceedings, despite pressure from Thomas Rundle and Jean Moore in the Baden-Nissan Navara. The gap between the two cars was visible when Grobler and Tersteger made an uncharacteristic mistake and took a wrong slot.
Recovery time for Grobler and Tersteger was quick, but not quick enough to prevent Rundle and Moore nipping into the lead, with the two cars racing almost side by side down the track.
If anyone ever had doubts about the straight-line pace of the diesel-powered RFS BMW, dramatic race cam pictures will have allayed those fears. With a farm gate approaching at a rapid rate of knots, Grobler decided discretion was the better part of valor and slotted in behind the Nissan Navara. But that was not the end of the drama. A few minutes later, both crews went off the route, and it was Grobler and Tersteger who recovered first to go back into the lead. Suddenly, it was all happening, and the race had come alive.
While locals relaxed and enjoyed the action, Colin Matthews and Alan Smith were hard at work in the Century Racing CR3. The thrust and counter-thrust between Grobler, Tersteger and Rundle Moore had allowed Matthews and Smith to close in on the two production cars. Matthews and Smith then split the pair when they moved ahead of the Baden-Nissan Navara, and now had their sights set firmly on moving ahead of Grobler and Tersteger.
It doesn't take long for matters to change in off-road racing. There'd been two lead changes within minutes of each other, and now Colin Matthews and Alan Smith were the meat in a production car sandwich. Although Matthews and Smith were not racing against the two production cars in terms of overall result, the racers' instincts were coming into play. Matthews and Smith were throwing everything they had at catching the RFS BMW, with Grobler and Tersteger waiting for the right place to move over and let the Century Racing pair go through unimpeded. It was a move typical of Grobler, and one which drew high praise from Matthews at the end of the race.
First in the special vehicle category and first in the production car category were now 1 and 2 on the road. As the first loop of the race drew to a close, the pressure was starting to build, with the first three cars closely bunched. The gap between Thomas Rundle and Jean Moore and the RFS BMW was still visible, and behind the lead cars, natters were warming up. Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst were now within 30 seconds of the leaders in the Ford Racing Ranger and running strongly. Behind the Ford, KZN crew Don Thompson and Wayne Foster were still second among the special vehicles, but were now nearly 2 minutes in arrears.
Drama continued to unfold when the Baden Tyre Services Nissan Navara picked up simultaneous right front and right rear punctures. It was a cruel blow for Thomas Rundle and Jean Moore, and the pair quickly lost a place when Gary Bertholdt and Andre Vermeulen went past the stricken Nissan Navara in the Atlas Copco Toyota Hilux. Changing tyres in the middle of the bush is no simple matter, and the Baden pair lost another place on the road when Nick and Ryan Harper eased their way past the Nissan Navara.
Next in line to pick up a place in the production car category were the steady, get-the-job-done with no airs and graces Jannie Visser and Joks Leroux in the Team Barber-spun Toyota Hilux. With younger brother Chris lying third in the Ford Ranger, it was turning into a good morning for the Visser family. Matters were also improving for the Silwald family, with Cully and Quinton Silwald steadily working their way through the field in the elegant field batch. A top 5 finish was now on the cards for the SA champions, and Johan van Staden and James Rousseau were thinking along the same lines when they picked up a place on the road by taking the Atlas Copco bat past Terence Marsh and George Smolberger in the Regent Racing Navara.
Although they were still a long way behind the leaders, it was an impressive Class A debut for Johan van Staden and James Rousseau. But for the 10-minute penalty incurred on the prologue, their race could have been a whole lot different. For Terence Marsh and George Smallberger, it was a case of getting to know each other in the car, with Smallberger making his off-road debut. Further up the road, Thomas Rundle and Jean Moore were still changing tyres.
This is awesome, man. So completely new and it's awesome. It's unfortunate for this puncture.
Watching the minutes tick by and other crews drive past was an exercise in frustration for the Baden-Navarra team. A morning that had promised so much had turned sour, but while Rundle and Moore had literally been stopped in their tracks, it was business as usual for Marius and Jolinda Fourie in the PHB Bet, with the husband and wife team being chased by brothers Johan and Etienne de Seidenhout in the Adenco Bet. The former SA champions were also racing under the burden of a 10-minute penalty, but had made some progress through the field.
A simple mechanical device was performing its job without any problems, while on the ground, some more complex mechanical devices were having mixed fortunes. It had been a lackluster morning for the RFS Machali's 400 overall winners, Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson, who had not recovered from time lost on the Donaldson prologue. The prologue had also provided Free State crew Louw de Bruin and Rian Greyling with an early setback in the Rurikon Ford Ranger. It was pretty much the same story for David and Gary White, who were also having a difficult weekend in the Rurikon Bat, with the brothers moving into Class A after a couple of years in Class P. The prologue also bit Christian de Plooy and Henk Janse van Vieren, who will next be seen in a petrol version of the BMW X3 on the Toyota Dealer 400 in Mpumalanga. Behind the RFS Toyota, another Northwest crew, Malcolm Koch and Jan Berger, were also making good progress in a Toyota Hilux. Racing is in the Koch gene. Koch's father, Andre, was an off-road star from yesteryear, and included in his curriculum vitae was a win on the Toyota Desert Race.
A herd of buck were disinterested spectators when Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin strutted their stuff in the new Castrol Toyota Hilux double cab. The pair were running half an hour behind the leaders, with fuel starvation and prop shaft problems again hampering progress. The main item on their agenda was to finish the race and gather in as much technical information to provide the engineers with meaningful feedback. While it was proving to be a tough baptism for the new factory cars, another Toyota crew were happy to be leading their class. Reigning champions Dion Venter and Ian Palmer had taken charge of Class D in the 4x4 Mega World entry and looked to be in complete control.
First into the designated service park at the Darling Club were Colin Matthews and Alan Smith, after what had been a perfect morning for the Century Racing crew.
Yeah, it's a lovely new route. Lots of new stuff, twisty, turny, up, down. It's beautiful.
Yeah, they changed the prop shaft now. That's probably where the vibration was, but it looks like it's fixed now, so hopefully we can go well now.
Yeah, it's going well. Yeah, I must say the loop is quite dusty, so we're just sticking out the dust. We can't actually get closer to honest, but it's going really well. I say no problem so far. Thanks.
Okay, it's tough out there. It's very, very slippery, very dusty. Hard to keep the car on the road. If you make a mistake, a lot of off-camera stuff. So far so good. We're holding it there. We had a few moments, but we came here and nothing wrong with the car, hopefully.
Yeah, we were leading the race, and unfortunately we had two punches at exactly the same time on the right-hand side of the car. So it took us some time to change that, and then we got back into the race, and apparently we fourth at the moment. So yeah, we've lost some time, but car's feeling good, so we'll just keep going on, and maybe the guys in the front make a bit of a mistake. They are, but quite far in front of us. So we'll just keep plodding along and see what happens.
It's a very enjoyable route. Unfortunately, yesterday we got a 10-minute penalty, so working our way through the field. Going well so far, so just keep up the pace and hopefully we can end up near the front. That's what we're aiming for.
It's lekker. It's rough in the beginning, midway it's relaxing, and then at the end it's rough again. So it's a very well designed course. We're enjoying it, and we just want to hang in and finish it today.
Outside, about 20 k's out in the first loop, we had a problem with the front diff mounting, same as we had yesterday. I think the design on it is not what it's supposed to be. And we had to do the whole loop with this diff mounting off, and obviously damaged the two other mountings that was holding onto the diff. And the diff is moving around in the vehicle. I don't know, that's fine, you're relying third overall, but now the problem is here. I don't know if they're going to fix it, and can we go out and see if we do the next loop.
Yeah, no, tough day. You know, normal teething problems. We've got a big prop shaft vibration now, but we'll put another one on now, and hopefully, I don't think the problem's going to go away, but we'll just have to wait and see, make it last for the event. Big thing is to get a result and get some points on the board.
It's hell. Very, very rough, and then we've still broken a car steering pump. So I've been doing my last 2 years gym out there today. But the rest of the car's going perfectly. If it wasn't for the power steering pump, I think we would have been quite fast.